Good evening. Great to be learning with you on a Wednesday afternoon, Yom Revi'i. Let's light up the darkness. Who's in the house? Paul in the Great Northwest, Paul in Minneapolis, Bell in Texas, Shandor in the Bronx, Bill in mid-Missouri. Prayers would be appreciated, friends. I find myself unemployed and searching for a job once again. Bill, you have so much to offer that any delay in bringing you to your place, the place that you were meant to be, is only because the place that you were meant to be requires this circuitous route. But may the Holy One above bring you to that place that is waiting for you, where you're going to make a tremendous impact at the right time, and may it be soon. And I can't wait to hear about it when you arrive there. We say amen. Sharon in New Jersey, Nancy, North Carolina, Bella in Florida, Jeff in Panama, bienvenido. Joseph in Massachusetts, Peggy in Colorado, Melissa in Great Neck, Joe in the Inland Empire, Renee in Indiana, Lucy in Minnesota, Aoife in Florida, Elisa, Shalom, Marjorie in Georgia, Lynn in North Texas. Welcome everybody. Big Daf, big double Daf. We're doing our best to catch up. We're currently running 2 days behind the Daf Yomi cycle, which is really not a big deal. I know lots of Daf Yomi classes that run, a week behind, even 2 weeks behind. But I like being caught up. It's good to be on the schedule. So we're doing our best. So we got a double daf. We are picking this up about a third of the way down on page 13a. We are in chapter 1. Today doing Mishna number 6. This is tractate Gittin, the 19th volume of the Talmud, the laws of divorce, specifically the bill of divorce, which a husband writes out. And when that is delivered to his wife in the presence of witnesses, that's when the couple is divorced. That is when she is no longer permitted to her husband, but rather becomes permitted to marry whoever she wants if it's a proper divorce. We have to make sure it's a proper divorce. If there's something lacking, legally lacking in that divorce, then they're not divorced. And if she goes and thinks she's remarried and really hasn't remarried, that's a very, very bad outcome. So we're going to be very particular that the get is written properly, witnessed properly, delivered properly, etc. Let me take a breath. I just ran in, and I just will mention, I'm not going to take a long time, but the reason I was in a hurry to get back and to teach this class is I was at a meeting that was created between Maganam, the security organization that I'm a part of, right? We carry firearms in our synagogues. We're licensed security guards so that we can do that. This meeting was created between our organization, the LAPD police chief, Michael Moore, Councilwoman Yaroslavsky, the U.S. Attorney for our district, the American Defense League, and various other organizations, talking about the intense danger that we find ourselves in of violent hate crimes against the Jewish community. The Jewish population of America is really very small, right? I mean, I don't know what we are, like 2% of the population, maybe not even 1.5%, but 63% of the hate crimes against a religious group are committed against the Jewish community. So it's a real state of danger. And I just want to thank the members of the city government, of the national government, the U.S. Attorney's Office, the Mayor's Office, LAPD, and all the other Jewish organizations in our city who are taking this very seriously and coming together to discuss solutions and cooperation and how we can work together to increase situational awareness and preparedness, God forbid, for the next hate crime that comes along. So that's where I was. And now I can take a breath and just focus on the teaching. Okay, Mishnah number 6 here in chapter 1. In the case of one who says, give this bill of divorce to my wife, or give this bill of manumission to my slave, which is a document to free the slave, and then the husband or the slave owner dies, one does not give it after his death. And the reason for this is that bills of divorce and manumission, by the way, in case you're not always with us, there's no slavery in the modern world under Jewish law, but it's accounted for in the ancient world when the sages were having these debates, where tragically slavery was a fact of everyday life in every country in the world. But at any rate, under this law, right? So if the man says, "Give this bill of divorce," now we learn a man and a woman are not divorced until she receives the bill of divorce. Whereas when he gives a bill of manumission to an agent to deliver to his slave in order to free the slave, the slave is free as soon as that document, that bill of manumission, is handed to the agent of delivery, because the agent of delivery can accept it, can acquire it on behalf of the slave, since it is only to the benefit of the slave to be free. Now, but here's the issue: is like, okay, having handed off this document, the get or the bill of manumission, and then before the woman is divorced, or even if the bill is written but it hasn't been handed off, it's written, it's set to be delivered, it's in the process of delivery, whatever the stage is. If this person dies before it's acquired by the wife or the slave, so then the divorce or the freeing, the manumission, are canceled. And the reason for this is that bills of divorce and manumission must be transferred by the husband or the master. Once he has died, the document can no longer be given, and the agency he appointed for this purpose is likewise canceled. However, if he said, "Give 100 dinars to so-and-so," and then he died, one does give the recipient the money after his death. And of course, there's going to be particularities to that situation. Now the Gemara. Rav Yitzchak bar Shmuel bar Marta says, in the name of Rav, and this ruling, that one gives the 100 dinars after the death of the owner, is the law only when those dinars are piled up and placed in a corner at the time of the command. And the Gemara will explain why. Now the Gemara asks, with what are we dealing? If we say that we are dealing with a healthy person who instructs others to give somebody 100 dinars, then when they are piled, what of it? After all, the recipient did not pull the money, right? Pull the money, that's talking about a kinyan. A kinyan is an act of acquisition, right? So under traditional Jewish law, when you make a sale of a movable object or a sale of a piece of land, there has to be a kind of symbolic but definitive act by the purchaser or the recipient, if it's a gift, of the acquisition, right? And until the acquisition is made, the movable object or the piece of land has not changed hands, right? So if, for example, you're selling a horse, right, to another guy, now he gives you the money, he has not yet acquired the horse. When does he acquire the horse? When he takes the reins of the horse and just pulls it toward him, right? So that's the formal act of acquisition. In the purchase of land, obviously you can't move the land, so what they do is they exchange a handkerchief. And when he receives the handkerchief, when the seller receives the handkerchief from the purchaser, that's when that piece of land has been transferred. So here, where somebody says, give 100 dinars, from my assets to that person, so that person, when does he receive it, right? It's when that money is moved, when he takes some of it. That's the opening salvo, so to speak, of this discussion. So the Gemara is saying, what are we talking about? Now they're going to make a distinction between somebody who says, give 100 dinars of my assets to so-and-so in the normal course of life, and another person who's lying on his deathbed and gives the same instruction. And what the sages have done is that when there's a deathbed instruction, the requirements for effecting that wish of the dying person are going to be lower. It's going to be easier for him to achieve that because, hey, he's on his deathbed, okay? He can't necessarily get his lawyer and his scribe and everyone right over here to do it all in the most formal way. So there's going to be, a little bit of help to the dying man that he can have his wishes granted, right, or performed. Right, so the Gemara says, what are we dealing? If we say that we're dealing with a healthy person, not one on his deathbed, who instructs others to give 100 dinars, so then what difference does it make whether those dinars are in a pile of money or not? After all, the recipient did not pull the money, and one must perform an act of acquisition, the kinyan, to take possession of movable property. Rather, say that what we are dealing with here is a person on his deathbed, in which case verbal instructions suffice. However, if that is so, why does the law apply specifically when the money is piled, when it's arranged in a pile? The same should be the case when the coins are not piled as well, as we maintain that the statement of a person on his deathbed who distributes his property is considered as though it were written and delivered. So if so, no other act of acquisition should be necessary. So Rav Zevid explains, actually, the Mishna is dealing with a healthy person, not one on his deathbed. And this ruling is in accordance with that which Rav Huna says that Rav says. As Rav Huna says that Rav says, with regard to one who says to another, I have 100 dinars in your possession, give it to so-and-so. Meaning, you owe me 100 dinars. You owe me 100 dinars. So they're my dinars because you owe them to me. You just haven't paid me yet. So since you owe them to me, they're technically mine, I can say to you, you know what? Instead of paying me what you owe, pay it to him because you owe me 100 dinars, I owe him 100 dinars. Just give it to him. Now, do we heed that instruction? Have I transferred the 100 dinars that you owe me and thus are technically mine to him who I owe 100 dinars to? When I say, okay, give the 100 dinars you owe me, give it to him. Have I now paid my debt to him? Right? Have I paid my debt to him? Where I said, okay, listen, what he owes me, now he owes it to you. Am I done? Right? Is it handled? Is the debt paid in that situation? Right? So Rav Zevid says, Rav Huna says in the name of Rav, I have 100 dinars in your possession, give it to so-and-so. If this occurred in the presence of all three parties, yes, the third person has acquired my 100 dinars that you're holding and that I now instruct you to give to him. If all three of us are in the same room, yes, he has acquired the 100 dinars. You no longer owe it to me. You owe it to him. I can step out. But if I say this to you and he's not in the room, he hasn't acquired. I have not taken care of my debt to him. And that's as it should be. If you're going to, ease your own administrative burden by not, by instead of having to receive and pay, to just transfer the debt straight over to him. Okay, but what if this guy never pays him? What if he's more scared of me than he is of him, and he's not going to be as reliable to pay him as he would have been to pay me? It creates a lot of problems. So the rule in this so far is that if all three of us are in the same room, then I can make that declaration and it sticks. Rav Papa said, okay, that's a good law, but that's not what we're talking about here in our Mishnah. When we compared that if somebody says, give a bill of divorce to my wife, and then before it gets delivered, I die, that bill of divorce can never be delivered. But if I say, give 100 dinars to so-and-so, then even if I die, it gets transferred. So Rav Papa says, actually, the Mishnah is dealing with a person that is on his deathbed. And it is in accordance with another ruling of Rav. As Rav says, with regard to a person on his deathbed who said, give 100 dinars to so-and-so from my property. So the law depends on his precise wording. If he said, give this 100 dinars, where the money is in a particular place. I'm not talking about 100 dinars somewhere from my assets. Who knows if I have 100 dinars liquid. Maybe like I have land that has to be sold before you'll have 100 dinars to give this guy. So we're not going to necessarily follow it. But if I say give this 100 dinars, right? I can point to 100 dinars. Now, it might be in a bank account. It might be on a table. But I can point to a liquid, available cash 100 dinars that you're going to give to so-and-so. Then we follow that instruction of the one on the deathbed. However, if the one on his deathbed merely said 100 dinars, as opposed to this 100 dinars or that 100 dinars, if I just said give him 100 dinars, then we do not give it to him, because this is a deathbed instruction that is too ambiguous in order to follow. Now, we're not talking about a will and disposition of assets, etc. We're just talking about a deathbed instruction, which, at least according to Rav Papa, is insufficient to trigger performing it. Now, why does one not give the 100 dinars if he did not add a further specification, the 100 dinars in my drawer, the 100 dinars in my bank account? We are concerned that perhaps this person on his deathbed spoke about a buried 100 dinars. Like, he knows that he's got 100 dinars buried in the backyard. And what he meant was, give him the 100 dinars that are buried in the backyard. But he didn't say that. He just said, give 100 dinars. Maybe no one else is aware of the buried 100 dinars, and they're never going to find it. So in order to produce 100 dinars out of the estate of this one after he dies, they're going to have to upend the inheritance of his children, of his heirs. And that's too unspecific according to this view. And that's why we don't just give 100 dinars if he didn't specify which 100 dinars. Now, the Gemara comments about this concept that was just mentioned. And the law is that we are not concerned about a buried sum of 100 dinars. The law is not in accordance with this opinion of Rav. And the Gemara asks, what is the reason that Rav Papa did not say an explanation that is in accordance with that of Rav Zevid with regard to Rav's statement? Now we're on 13b. And the Gemara answers, Rav Papa holds that when Rav said that a transfer in the presence of all three parties is effective, it is no different if this is referring to a loan from the first party to the second party, where it is an abstract monetary obligation that is transferred. And it is no different if it is referring to a deposit, where specific money is transferred, right? We said before, if you owe me 100 dinars and I owe him 100 dinars, can I say, okay, pay the 100 dinars that you owe me to him? And we said that seems like it will work if all three of us are in the same room. Now, is it different if the reason that you owe me 100 dinars is not because, 20 years ago we had a bet and that you never paid it off, that's 100 dinars you owe me, but rather because I deposited a bag of money with you that you are holding on to. Very specific. And you owe me that because I deposited with you. Maybe I've even paying you to watch it if you're basically in the role of a bank. And I can say, okay, that 100 dinars that I deposited with you, give it to him. Is that different than the abstract loan? Perhaps. Now, the Gemara asks the reverse question. What is the reason that Rav Zevid did not say in accordance with the explanation of Rav Papa? And the Gemara answers, he holds that it is not possible to establish our Mishna as referring to a person on his deathbed. From where does he learn this? It is from the fact that it teaches, in the case of one who says, give this bill of divorce to my wife, or give this bill of manumission to my slave, and then he dies, one should not give it after his death. Why does that not make sense that he's saying that on his deathbed? Bottom line, let's see. Well, hold on, let's just keep going. The Gemara first. Now, the reason for this ruling is that the man died. However, if it was while he was alive, then one gives the document. So the Gemara continues, even during his lifetime, the reason for the ruling is specifically that he said, give it to my wife. But if he did not say give, and he merely commanded, write a bill of divorce, then one does not give it. And that makes sense, right? If a man says, write a bill of divorce for my wife, does the scribe say, oh, okay, I write it, sign it, I'm going to run out and give it to your wife? No, maybe he just wants it written in case things get bad enough that he's got the bill of divorce ready. But he never said, give it to my wife. But a man on his deathbed, if he says, write a bill of divorce for my wife, we understand that he has very few hours left in this world. If he's asking for a bill of divorce at that time, it means he wants it delivered to his wife before he dies, because we know that a bill of divorce cannot be delivered after he dies. The moment he dies, she's a widow. The divorce document is, poof. It's a nonsensical document at that time. The only way for that document to have any meaning is for it to be delivered to his wife before he dies. Why would he divorce his wife when he's on his deathbed? Well, because perhaps the inheritance issues surrounding this family would be better served in his eyes if she is his ex-wife rather than his widow. Where am I? Right, so even during his lifetime, the reason for the ruling is specifically that he said give. But if he did not say give, if he merely commanded write a bill of divorce, then one might write it, but he would not give it to the wife. But this is not the case with regard to a person on his deathbed, as, although he did not say, give it to her, but simply commanded, write the bill of divorce, nevertheless, one gives the document. Evidently, the law cannot be, so our Mishnah, therefore, cannot be referring to a person on his deathbed because it used this language of give. Now, that's reading into the Mishnah a little bit. I mean, he could have said right, and then we probably would have guessed that it's a deathbed scenario, but does using the command give take it out of the deathbed scenario? Not necessarily. But first, the Gemara comments, as we learned in a Mishnah on page 65b of this tractate, initially the sages would say, with regard to one who is taken out in a neck chain. Taken out in a neck chain means somebody's been arrested by the government and is going to be taken to be executed. That's what the phrase taken out in a neck chain means. If this person said, right, and that's obviously not under Jewish law, but, because the sages were operating either in occupied Israel, occupied by Rome, or, within Bavel, which is Babylonia, which at that time was ruled by the Persian Empire. So in both cases, they had to deal with a secular law and a secular government. Right, so somebody is taken out in a neck chain to be executed, and this man, on the way to be executed, said, write a bill of divorce for my wife. These people should write and give her the document. Although he did not explicitly say, give it to her, this is understood to have been his intention. Why would he want that? Now, if he's being taken out in a neck chain, right, by a secular government, not by a rabbinic court, they might never see the execution. He's being led away. It's given to understand that they might never see him again. But if they never see him again, they'll never be sure that he was actually executed because the Romans or the Persians might not return the body, or wherever else he was fighting a war as a soldier, and the body might disappear. So there, the wife would be stuck as an aguna, a stranded wife who could never remarry because there's no proof that her husband died or that he was killed. So in that situation, the husband might say, if he has at all the opportunity, write a bill of divorce for my wife. Right? That's for her benefit so that the marriage will be terminated. Now you could say it's a conditional bill of divorce that if I come back, we were never divorced. Or they could just remarry at that time, if she hasn't married someone else. But it's for her benefit because the guy thinks he's going to be killed and his body might disappear. That's why he says, write a bill of divorce. Now, in that situation, we understand that he wants the agent to write the bill of divorce and give it to the wife so that they can complete the divorce. And they then said that this law applies, that when in that situation, that context, write a bill of divorce means write it and give it. And they then, the sages said that this law applies even to one who sets sail and one who departs in a caravan to a far-off place. A bill of divorce is given to his wife under these circumstances, even if her husband said just right, because he did that for her advantage, and we're going to honor that. Now, Rabbi Shimon Shazuri says, even in the case of one who is dangerously ill, who gives that instruction, they write the bill of divorce and give it to his wife. And this shows that a dying person need not say give, rather it is sufficient for him to say write it. And it has to be given to her before he dies, right? You understand that? Now, by contrast, our Mishnah indicates that it is referring to a person who says give at the outset. He's using the verb give. Therefore, it is certainly not speaking about a dying person. That's what Rabbi Shimon Shazuri says. Rav Ashi objects to this claim. And who says to us that the Mishnah is in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Shimon Shazuri? Perhaps it is in accordance with the opinion of the rabbis, the majority, who did not include a dangerously ill person in their list of those who are not required to say, give it to her, and that it's enough to just say, write it, and then it's implied that he wants it given to her also. Okay, but the rabbis disagree that we would add the case of a dangerously ill person to that list. So if so, why? Because a dangerously ill person might recover, right? We don't know. So unless he says, write it and give it to her, we're not going to give it to her. So if so, it is possible that our Mishnah is referring to a person who is on his deathbed after all. Now the Gemara discusses the matter itself. Rav Huna says that Rav says, with regard to one who says to another, I have 100 dinars in your possession, give it to so-and-so. If this occurred in the presence of all three parties, the third person has acquired it. Rava said it stands to reason that Rav's statement is with regard to a deposit, when the owner of the deposit instructs its guardian to transfer specific money under his authority to someone else who is also present. However, in the case of a loan, no, one cannot dispense with an act of acquisition, as repayment of a loan does not involve specific money. If I deposit a bag of money with you, you're its guardian. I can tell you, give that bag of money to so-and-so. You're holding it for me. It's my money. You're the guardian. I can instruct you that when it's time to return that money, to give it to him. And he doesn't have to acquire it for him to be the owner, the new owner of the money. If the three of us are in the room, that works. But if I lent you money, you owe me money. It's not a specific bundle of money. It's just a specific amount. But nonetheless, if I lent you money, you owe me 100 dinars. And I say, okay, the 100 dinars you owe me, pay it to him. He has not yet acquired those 100 dinars. He hasn't done any kind of active acquisition. So even if the three of us are in the same room, he does not become the new lender in my place. Rava himself adds in the form of an oath, but by God, in truth, Rav said this halacha even with regard to a loan, that he does become the lender in that situation. And the Gemara adds, it was also stated that Shmuel said in the name of Levi, that if someone says to another, I have a loan in your possession, you owe me payment for a loan, and I say give it to so-and-so, and then this occurred in the presence of all three parties, then the named person, that guy, has acquired it. He has stepped into my place and now is considered the lender. The Gemara asks, and what is the reason for this? In what manner does he acquire the rights to that loan that you formerly owed to me? In what manner did he acquire it? And Amaymar said, the case becomes like that of a borrower who says to a lender at the time of the giving of the money, when he receives a loan, I am beholden to you and to anyone who comes based on your authorization. Right? In other words, when you borrowed the money from me, what you agreed to is you owe me the 100 dinars and you'll pay it to whoever I appoint to receive it, either myself or I can appoint somebody else to receive it. Now, Rav Ashi said to Amaymar, if that is so, that the borrower's obligation to the third party went into effect at the time the loan was made, because I either said explicitly or it was implied that I could appoint someone else to receive the loan on my behalf, and so he technically acquired it at the time the loan was made. If that is so, then if I transfer it to him in the presence of the three parties, to those who will be born, i.e. people who were not yet born when the money was initially given, the law should also be that the recipients do not acquire it. And the reason is that at the time the lender gave the money to the borrower, the person to whom it would eventually be transferred did not yet exist, and therefore the borrower could not have become obligated to him at that point in time. Right? If I'm saying to you, okay, the money you owe me, pay it to him. But let's say that this is, a 5-year-old kid, and when I lent you the money, it was 10 years ago. So this kid didn't exist then. So how can you say that technically he acquired it at the time the loan was made because I said you'll owe it to me or whoever I appoint, but he didn't exist yet? And you can't make a party to a transaction of a person who does not exist, even though you're going to say, well, in the future, when I have kids, or when somebody has kids, or when somebody's, you can't make a party to a contract who doesn't exist yet. Rav Ashi elaborates as, even according to the opinion of Rabbi Meir, who says that a person can transfer ownership of an entity that has not yet come into the world, I can say, when my chicken lays an egg tomorrow, I'm going to give that egg to him. Rabbi Meir allows that. I can make the subject of an agreement, an object that does not yet exist. But even Rabbi Meir would agree that I can't make a party to that agreement, a person who does not yet exist. Now, rather, Rav Ashi says that this is the reason for what we're talking about now. Now we're on 14a. With that benefit that the borrower receives when his debt changes from an old debt to a new debt, he fully pledges himself to the new lender. The borrower prefers to have a new lender from whom he can ask an extension of the deadline. Very interesting. Because I lent you money, you owe me $100, and now I say the $100 you owe me, you now owe it to Jim over here, right? Now you've owed me $100, let's say for a few years, and you didn't pay. I'm getting tired of waiting. I owe Jim $100, so now I say in the presence of Jim, okay, the $100 you owe me, now you owe it to Jim. Now this is a benefit to you, right? You owe me, you were supposed to pay me 2 years ago. Now you owe Jim, not me. So as far as owing Jim, that just came into existence today. If you're going to be the type of borrower who delays paying back the loan, I'm just talking to a camera here, I'm not casting aspersions on whoever's watching, but if you're going to be the type of borrower who delays paying, well, you have a whole new set of delays that can go into effect now because Jim only just entered the equation. And if you say to him, hey, listen, just give me a few weeks, which becomes a few months, whatever, there's an advantage to you that the old loan just became a new loan. Now, Huna Mar, the son of Rav Nehemiah, said to Rav Ashi, now we're on 14a, if that is so, what about a case where the debt is transferred to these members of the house of Bar Eliashiv, as those implacable people bind debtors with handcuffs and take their money immediately when the time for repayment arrives, right? If I say, well, you don't owe me $100 anymore, you owe Jim, and you're thinking, oh, great, now I can start delaying the payment for a while longer. But what you don't realize is Jim is not just some guy. Jim is a loan shark. When I transfer this debt that you owe me to Jim, you better pay immediately or Jim is going to break your kneecaps. Jim is not the kind of guy that you want to be owing money to. So rather than be an advantage that you no longer owe me and you owe him, now it's a disadvantage to you. Does that change the equation? So too will you say that they do not acquire the money in the presence of all three parties, as the borrower would not agree to this arrangement. Right? The borrower would not agree to now be in debt instead of to me, a nice guy, instead, over to Tony Soprano over there. So any of you would say that indeed this method is not effective in a case of this kind. So if so, you have rendered your statement subject to circumstances. In other words, the application of the acquisition of money that you owe me, which is now going to be transferred to him, and he didn't do any active acquisition. What we said is, well, if I make that statement that you don't owe it to me anymore, you owe it to him, and all three of us are in the same room, it's going to be a valid statement and a valid transfer, even though he didn't do anything to make a formal active acquisition that he's now the owner. He's now the new lender, as it were. He's now the owner of the money that is in your possession. So without that act, so are we going to say that the fact that we can do this statement in the presence of three parties and not need a formal active acquisition is going to be dependent on whether the borrower would agree to it or not? Is that what we're going to say? Or are we going to say it's a general principle? So the Gemara retracts the previous explanation in favor of that which Mar Zutra said. These three matters were instituted by the sages as, ready for this, a halacha without a reason. The sages knew they had a law that they needed to enact for whatever policy considerations existed in their time, and they couldn't back it up with logic. Now, either it was because it flowed from another law in the Torah, and it was some kind of a hook, right? The kind of law that it has no rational basis, and we do it just because God said so. But this is not by itself a law that God said so. This is a law that the sages decreed. So are the sages going to decree an illogical law? Apparently, in a few specific cases. And here we're learning of 3 of them. So what are these 3 cases where the sages decreed a halacha without a reason? One is this case of an acquisition in the presence of all 3 parties. And another is that which Rav Yehuda says, that Shmuel says, one who writes over all his property to his wife as a gift has rendered her only a steward of the property, but she does not become the owner. And another is that which Rav Hanania says with regard to one who marries a woman to his eldest son, and the wedding takes place in the father's house, the son has acquired the house. What? If I throw a wedding for my son, who happens to be my oldest son and his bride, and I do it in my backyard, now my son and his new bride take ownership of my house? What? So not so simple. Here's the halacha. If a man marries off his eldest son in his house, he has transferred ownership of that house to his son. But this halacha, this law, applies only if it is the son's first marriage, and the father did not marry off any of his other sons before him, and it applies only if the father did not keep for himself any rights to this house. If I don't have an intent to give my son the house, he doesn't get the house, right? The reason that he's getting the house is because I'm intending to give him the house, and his younger brothers can't complain. That's what this law is all about, right? It's about the inheritance of the oldest son vis-a-vis the other brothers. Not that if I don't want to give the house away, he gets it anyway. Okay. Now the Gemara asks, can one learn... Wait a minute, where am I? With regard to the acquisition in the presence of all 3 parties, which apparently happens if all 3 are there, right? You owe me money. I can say, now you owe it to him. That's going to be a valid transfer to him as long as all 3 of us are in the same room. Now, with regard to that principle, the Gemara relates. Rav said to Rav Acha Bardella, I have a kav, which is a measurement of saffron, with you that you owe me, right? I deposited a bundle of saffron with you. Okay. And then Rav said to Rav Acha Bardella, so this bundle of saffron that I deposited with you, give it to so-and-so. And Rav added, I say this to you in his presence so that I will not retract from this statement. So because it was said in the presence of all 3 parties, the transfer is valid. He didn't have to move the bag of saffron. He didn't have to do any kind of active acquisition, but it became his because I made my statement in the presence of all 3 of us. If I had said to you, give that bag of saffron to so-and-so, but so-and-so wasn't in the room, so I could change my mind. Now that he is in the room, I can't change my mind. Now the Gemara asks, can one learn by inference that if he had not stipulated in this manner and he wished to retract his statement, he could in fact retract it? This would mean that a standard acquisition in the presence of all 3 parties is not fully effective like we just learned that it was. Now the Gemara answers that this is what Rav said. I am saying this to you in his presence because these types of statements issued in the presence of all 3 parties cannot be retracted. I.e., Rav was not adding a condition, but explaining the law. So that's what we would expect. If I make this transfer to him with all 3 of us here, it's a valid transfer. I can't take it back. That's what we expect. That's what we learn. So the Gemara asks, okay, but why is this statement of Rav recorded at all? That he said, I make this statement so that I cannot retract it. We know he cannot retract it because we just learned the law. That if all 3 parties are there, the transfer has happened. So why is the statement of Rav recorded at all? Rav already said this halacha once. As Rav Huna says that, Rav says, with regard to one who says to another, I have 100 dinars in your possession, give it to so-and-so. And if this occurred in the presence of all 3 parties, the third person has acquired it. So why is the statement of Rav recorded? And the Gemara explains, if the method of acquisition in the presence of all three parties was derived from that law alone, I would say that this matter, i.e. the need for the presence of the third party, applies only for the transfer of a large gift. However, in the case of a small gift, one does not need to do this in the presence of the recipient. Instead, the giver can simply provide instructions and thereby transfer the gift to the other person, as there is no reason to think he would retract. Therefore, Rav teaches us that this is not the case, as in all cases, the transfer takes effect only in the presence of all three parties. So the Gemara relates, there were certain gardeners who made a calculation of money owed to each other, and there remained with one of them 5 istere zuse, coin, more than he should have received. So the others said to him, give the money to the owner of the land. And they said this in the presence of the owner of the land. And the owner of the land acquired the money from him. In other words, the owner of the land performed a proper act of acquisition, obligating the gardener to pay that amount. Ultimately, the gardener went and performed the calculation on his own, and he concluded that nothing extra had been left over with him. So when they all stood together and they did the math and it seemed like there was extra money, the one who was holding the extra money, they all discussed it and all said to them, okay, the extra money that belongs to the three of us, give it to the owner of the land. They all agreed the owner of the land was there, so he acquired it. But it was based on the assumption that the math was right and that there was extra money. When the math turned out to be wrong and there was no extra money, do we cancel this acquisition of something that never existed? Or do we say, hey, you said you're holding 5 istere and that it belongs to him. We all heard it, he was including him, so you got to give it to him. What's the outcome? So the gardener came before Rav Nachman to ask what to do. And Rav Nachman said to him, what can I do for you? The first issue is that Rav Huna said that Rav said, an acquisition in the presence of all three parties takes effect immediately, and therefore the owner of the land has already acquired the money. And additionally, he performed an actual act of acquisition and thereby acquired the money from you. So Rava said to Rav Nachman, is that to say that the gardener said, I will not give? In other words, he did not refuse to give a sum in which he was obligated. He actually said, which is not in my possession, as his colleagues told him to give 5 istere that remained in his possession, and now he claims that this money actually belongs to him. So Rav Nachman said to him, if so, it is an acquisition performed in error. And any acquisition performed in error reverts back to the previous owner. So that's the equitable outcome that we would hope for, right? The money never existed, this so-called extra money, and so the owner couldn't have acquired it, and so the gardener remained with it. Slightly new subject. It was stated that Amoraim, the sages of the Gemara, disagreed with regard to the following dilemma. If someone instructs an agent, deliver 100 dinars to so-and-so, as I owe him that sum. Rav says, the person who sends him the money bears financial responsibility for their loss, right? I owe Jim 100 dinars. Jim is not in LA, where I am. Jim is in San Francisco. My buddy Tom is going up to San Francisco. Hey, here's the 100 dinars I owe Jim. Now that you're going up to San Francisco, please deliver this money to Jim while you're up there. Jim never gets the money. Who's at fault? Do we say, well, I gave the money to Tom. It must be that Tom pocketed the money or lost the money, but I'm done. Who owes the money? I owe the money to Jim. Who decided how the money would get to Jim? I decided how the money would get to Jim. Who is responsible if the money is lost? I am responsible. Rav says the person who sends the money, right, the one who originally owes, bears financial responsibility for the loss. Now, if the 100 dinars are lost by the agent, the sender must give another 100 dinars to repay his debt. But if the sender seeks to retract this payment after he has given it to the agent, he cannot retract it. Why? Because my buddy up in San Francisco, Jim, only benefits when the money gets to him, right? I mean, money that is owed to him, it's only a benefit to him if somebody acquires it for him. So when I give it to my agent, the agent I appointed, At the moment I give it to the agent, it's like the bill of manumission that's being given to an agent of delivery to take to a slave. The slave becomes free as soon as the agent receives the bill of manumission. Jim owns that money as soon as I give it to Tom, who's going up to San Francisco. But if Tom loses it, I still have to send replacement money. Interesting, right? But it's only, so in other words, so Jim didn't really acquire it because I appointed Tom, and Tom is carrying the money on my behalf. So you would think that I can retract it as long as I can get a hold of Tom before Tom reaches Jim. Now, maybe in the era of cell phones, this might be a little bit different outcome, but the bottom line is the law is written here is if the money never gets to Jim, I'm responsible. I have to send replacement money. But as soon as I give it to Tom, I cannot retract. I've paid off and I can't change my mind. Now, the Gemara suggests, so that's the law according to Rav. Shmuel says, since the sender bears financial responsibility for the loss if it's lost on the way up to San Francisco, this indicates that the 100 dinars are considered to still be in the sender's domain, which means that if he wants to retract, he can retract, right? It's like Shmuel was anticipating, hey, cell phones, I could call the guy as long as before he hasn't delivered the money yet up to Jim, I can say, you know what? I need that money. Don't give it to Jim. Bring it back. I'll pay Jim another day. And I can do that according to Shmuel, but not according to Rav. Now, the Gemara suggests, let us say that they disagree. What is that Rav and Shmuel actually disagree about? Let us say that they disagree about this issue. As one sage, Rav, holds that saying deliver is like saying acquire. And therefore, the agent immediately acquires the money on behalf of the recipient. For this reason, the sender cannot retract. And the other sage, Shmuel, holds that saying deliver is not the same as saying acquire. And the recipient has not yet acquired the money, and that's why the sender can still retract before the recipient has received. But the Gemara rejects this understanding of the issue between Rav and Shmuel. No, everyone agrees that saying deliver is like saying acquire. And here in this case, what they disagree about is this. Rav holds that we do not say that since the sender bears financial responsibility for the loss of the money, he can retract. Therefore, he cannot retract. And the other sage, Shmuel, holds that we do say that since the sender bears financial responsibility for the loss, he can retract. Now, the Gemara comments, it is taught in a baraisa in accordance with the opinion of Rav, Tosefta 1:6. If one said to another, deliver 100 dinars to so-and-so, as I owe him that sum, or if he said, give 100 dinars to so-and-so, as I owe him that sum, or if he said, deliver 100 dinars to so-and-so, as they are a deposit that he has in my possession, or if he said, give 100 dinars to so-and-so, as they are a deposit that he has in my possession, in all these cases, the sender bears financial responsibility for their loss. But if he seeks to retract the mission to deliver the money to so-and-so, he can no longer retract. He bears financial responsibility. The money doesn't get to the recipient, but he cannot retract. Now, the Gemara asks, with regard to this baraisa, in a case where the agent accepts upon himself to bring a deposit to its owners, let the sender, who is the bailee of the deposit, say to the agent, it is not the will of the owner of the deposit that his deposit will be in the possession of another. Since this transfer is not in the interests of the owner of the deposit, the money should remain fully in the possession of the sender, and therefore he should be able to retract. And Rabbi Zera says this is referring to a case where the sender, who is the bailee of the deposit, is established as a denier of financial obligations. He's somebody who often welches on his debts. For this reason, the owner of the deposit, the one who actually is owed the money, prefers that the money be transferred to someone else, and the sender cannot claim that it is not the will of the owner of the deposit that his deposit will be in the possession of another, right? If somebody is known to welch on debts, then any time the owner, the lender, or his agent can get a hold of the money, get it out of the hands of the guy who's known to welch, that's a benefit. So we would want that situation to be performed in that way. Now the Gemara relates, Rav Sheshes had a credit of cloaks in the city of Mechoza, meaning he had a set agreement with merchants that he would give them cloaks to sell in the city of Mechoza, and they would later reimburse him. Right? He was sending merchandise to the retailers before they paid him, basically consigning his merchandise to these retailers, and then they would sell it, and then they would pay him for the goods that he had already given them, right? So he's already sent the goods to them. They owe him the money. Now, Rav Sheshes said to Rav Yosef bar Chama, when you come to Mechoza, bring me the money. Right? So, in other words, Rav Sheshes sent the merchandise, these cloaks, to his retailers in Mechoza. Now his buddy Rav Yosef is going to Mechoza. He knows that the retailers there owe him money. So Rav Sheshes has said, when you're in Mechoza, pick up the money that those retailers owe me and bring it back to me. So Rav Yosef went, and he brought the money to him. Now he picked up the money. Now those who gave him the money said to him, let us make an acquisition for what you have received, so that if something happens to the money, you will be responsible. And Rav Yosef said, okay. Right? So in other words, Rav Sheshes is owed money. He sends Rav Yosef to collect it. And the people who owe the money to Rav Sheshes, when they give it to Rav Yosef, they say, okay, we're sending money with you. But in case you lose it, and we don't know you that well, I mean, you were sent to us by Rav Sheshes, okay, you're a sage, okay, but who knows what's going to happen? Maybe you're going to lose it before it gets back to Rav Sheshes. We're sending the money with you, but we want to consider that as soon as we give this money to you, we've paid our debts. You're Rav Sheshes' agent, not ours. So when we give you the money, we're done. That's what it means that they're saying make an acquisition, that you, Rav Yosef, have acquired it on behalf of Rav Sheshes, but when we give you the money, we're done. We don't want it said that you're our agent delivering the money back to Rav Sheshes, and in case you lose it, we're still on the hook. And Rav Yosef said yes. Now, ultimately, he escaped them and did not perform the act of acquisition. He said, okay, we could do an act of acquisition, but before they actually gave him the money, he didn't do some kind of act of acquisition. Now, remember, the three people are not in the room. So it wasn't done through that method of the three people being in the room because Rav Sheshes was never there. So you might think, well, handing over the money, that's the act of acquisition. But no, when they handed him the money, he would have had to, like take a handkerchief or give a handkerchief or do some other formal act of acquisition. He never did that. So in other words, he said, I accept the money as your agent to deliver it to Rav Sheshes, but I'm not acquiring the money myself, right? And so becoming now the possessor of this money, and I personally owe this money to Rav Sheshes. He didn't do that. He said he would, but he didn't. Ultimately, he escaped them, and he never performed that act of acquisition. When Rav Yosef came back before Rav Sheshes and told him what had occurred, Rav Sheshes said to him, you did well, as you did not render yourself personally liable. And thus the subject of the verse from Proverbs 22, the borrower is a slave to the lender by obligating yourself for no reason. It's good you didn't do that. You were just bringing money. You shouldn't become a party to the transaction. You're just a delivery man. You didn't want to become personally obligated to me. So in another version of this incident, Rav Sheshes said to Rav Yosef, you did well. As the verse states, the borrower is a slave to the lender. I.e., the merchants who borrowed from me must bear responsibility to ensure that the money will reach me. And what you're getting the sense at, the retailers over in Mechoza who said, well, take this money and bring it back to Rav Sheshes, but we're only going to do that if you acquire it personally. And now you're the one who has the debt to Rav Sheshes. And why did he say yes? Because they were probably saying, either you take it or we're going to beat the crap out of you under those conditions. Or either you're going to take it under those conditions or we're not handing over the money. Rav Yosef wanted to get the money to Rav Sheshes, but didn't want to become personally liable for it because he was just doing a favor for a friend. He wasn't a paid delivery person. And that's why Rav Sheshes said, you did well to get out of that situation without becoming personally liable. Now the Gemara further relates, Rabbi Achai, the son of Rabbi Yoshia, had a silver vessel in the city of Nehardea. Now we're on 14b. And we're going to only do a part of 14b, so we're almost done. Rabbi Achai said to Rabbi Dostai bar Rabbi Yanai and to Rabbi Yosef bar Kephar, when you come from Nehardea, bring that silver vessel to me. So these rabbis went to Nehardea, and the people who were in possession of the silver vessel gave it to them. Now, after handing over the vessel, those people said the same thing that the people of Mechoza had said. Okay, we're handing over this silver vessel to you. We understand it belongs to Rabbi Achai, but we're handing it to you. So you acquire it from us as if you purchased it, and now it's your silver vessel. And if you owe it to Rabbi Yanai, that's between you and him. We're done, right? We're out of it. Now, again, these were friends doing a favor for a friend. They didn't want to become personally liable. They were just doing the favor of transporting this expensive silver vessel. But he wanted to succeed in the mission. Now, the ones in Nehardea said, okay, we're only going to give you the silver vessel if you acquire it personally. So they said, let us perform an active acquisition with you so that you will be responsible for the vessel until you reach Rabbi Achai. And the agents, the friends of Rabbi Achai, said to them, no, we do not want to do this. We don't want to become personally liable. And they said to them, well, if so, give back the vessel, as we do not wish to transfer in such a manner that we retain responsibility. Rabbi Dostai, the son of Rabbi Yanai, said, okay, I'll give it back to you. I don't want to be personally responsible. If you don't want to hand it to me to deliver to my friend Rabbi Achai, where you remain responsible until he actually gets it, then I'm out of it. Take it back. But his friend, right, the third friend who was there, Rabbi Yosef bar Kephar, said to them, no, you handed it to us to give to our friend Rabbi Achai. You can't take it back. So they tormented Rabbi Yosef bar Kephar to force him to agree to return the vessel. And Rabbi Yosef bar Kephar said to Rabbi Dostai, see, my master, what they are doing to me. They're torturing me. And Rabbi Dostai said to them, well, you're acting well. Hit him. Right? Because Rabbi Yosef, in his zeal to sort of collect this silver vessel for Rabbi Achai, was, in a sense, extorting these people and saying, look, you handed it to me. I'm not going to become personally responsible for it, but I am going to take it back to Rabbi Achai. And they said, well, since we're still responsible for it, we don't want to give it to you. And he didn't want to give it back, and they forced him to give it back. Rabbi Yosef thought they were being inappropriate, but the other sage with him, Rabbi Dostai, said, no, you should have given it back because they weren't willing to give it to you on these terms. When these two friends came back before Rabbi Achai, Rabbi Yosef bar Kephar, the one who had been beaten up, said to him, see, my master, not only did Rabbi Dostai not support me in that incident, but rather he even said to them, you are acting well, hit him. And Rabbi Achai said to Rabbi Dostai, why did you do that? And Rabbi Dostai said, well, those people who were in possession of the vessel, they are the size of a cubit, and their hats were a cubit, and they spoke from their midpoints, and their names were frightening, Arda and Arta and Pili Baresh. And if you were to say to them, restrain this person, they would restrain him. If they were to say, kill him, they would kill him. Had they killed Dostai, who would give Yana, my father, another son like me? In other words, Dostai was saying, the people that you sent us to collect this silver vessel from, they were big, mean, angry, and well connected with the government. That's what all those descriptors mean. And so I wasn't about to pick a fight with them. I said, fine, I don't want to acquire it. I don't want a personal liability. If you don't want to deliver with me under those circumstances, take it back. Rabbi Yosef tried to take it anyway. He was making a big mistake because those were scary people. We were in a dangerous situation and we could have got killed. Rabbi Achai said to him, are these people close to the government? And Rabbi Dostai said, yes. So Rabbi Achai asked him, do they have horses and mules that run after them? I.e., do they have servants to perform their bidding? Rabbi Dostai said, yes. So Rabbi Achai said to him, well, if so, you acted well. Rabbi Yosef was being overzealous and definitely not appropriate, and you, Dostai, understood the situation better. All right. We completed 2 das. We didn't fully finish page 14, but enough that today was a double day. We'll pick up the remainder part of that page 14b tomorrow. Let's just see if we have a time for a couple of quick questions on 13 and 14. Sharon, maybe. Wait. Oh, I see. Joseph asked a question and others answered it. Okay. So no direct questions to me. Very good. I love it that we've got people who understand the material we're doing so well that you're asking great questions and other members of the class are able to answer the questions. Beautiful. As it should be. I'm so happy that the whole level of our class keeps rising. That's what I've got for us today. With God's help, we'll be together again tomorrow night, Thursday, for Daf 15, which I think will be a single Daf tomorrow since we owe a bit of 14. Have a great night.